restarting recording. We had some issues with tech, but we were all sorted out. So our workshop today is going to be on human-centered design. It is a design thinking 101 workshop, where the idea is we want folks to be able to come up with really interesting ideas, but also refine them and iterate on ones which are actually working. And the idea here is also that you're going to continuously iterate any idea that you come up with as you go through. I will say a lot of this content has been developed by Arpita Savalia, who is a former YC program coordinator, as well as Tivia Giapalan, who was another kind of outreach staff person for YC. So they've really kind of helped design a lot of the core presentation that you're seeing here, although the content will be things which probably you have come up with in various workshops in the past, and then ones that we are repackaging for a more YC specific kind of focus. So in the beginning, we want to kind of talk a little bit about what human-centered design is. We might try a couple skill builders and whatnot, and we're also going to be thinking about kind of how do we take problems, understand problems really well, and then ultimately turn them into impactful and effective solutions. There's also going to be, as I shared already, there's workshops around market research, workshops that we're exploring around a whole bunch of topics that people are also welcomed to welcome. We welcome you to kind of check out that have happened before and some that are going to be happening in the future. So in the beginning, we just want to like really kind of have a couple things in mind. There are no bad ideas, especially in those beginning stages. I think every idea may be something worth testing. And perhaps, one idea turns out to be less optimal as you do your testing and you do your research and you realize that, hey, this is not really a problem that a community I care about is facing. Or maybe you realize that, all these solutions that you could come up with, yours addresses some of it, but not the root problem. So maybe there's another variation of the solution which is more effective. Also, we are here to learn. We encourage folks to be creative and ultimately share some of their work as well. There are going to be times when I may ask the audience some questions. So although the main question period was going to be at the end, there may be some times just Kevin, as the folks here, I might kind of draw upon you to just some exercise and stuff where we get you thinking and brainstorming with us. So first things first is in terms of our first kind of a little bit exercise is we want to do a bit of a skill builder. So I'm going to encourage both of you. We did a variation of this with our ideation workshop. We're going to do another kind of variation because I do think it's going to help with human-centered design. So Kevin and Jess, could you folks find an object that's near you? And let me know when you've done that. And once you've done that, I'm going to ask you to think about all the ways that you could use this object, including in unconventional ways. For example, a piece of paper is not just something you can write with. It can also be a paper airplane. It could be a projectile that you throw at people. It could be a lot of different things. So it could be like something that helped build a fire, all of these things. So I would like you folks to find an object near you. Give me a thumbs up when you've picked them, and then we'll share a bit about what you see is your favorite use. So we'll give it like it says 5 minutes here. I think 2 or 3 minutes should be enough. So yeah, give me a thumbs up when you've picked an object near you. It can be an everyday object, doesn't have to be fancy. All right, Jess has their object. Kevin, do you have your object? Something near you? Feeling maybe Kevin's gone offline here for a bit, which is okay. So, all right, Jess, why don't we start with you? So, we'll give it a couple minutes and maybe you can think about kind of what kind of potential uses you would have for this object of yours.
Sure. So I have a couple. It was one of the backups I'd actually come up with from the ideation session. So I guess I'm a little bit over prepared.
All right, that's perfect.
I
Yeah.
have a ball of yarn on my desk that uh, typically is used for something like knitting or tying things with string. but can also be used in combination with candle wax as like an emergency fire starter, to wrap presents and or as a fidget toy.
Amazing. That sounds good. Yeah, I used to work with youth in the outdoor education space, and I remember this whole fire thing. So you take the yarn, put it in wax, and then like wrap it around, and it can last a whole whack of time. And I remember there was one time when actually I was camping and I actually needed it, so like a very very effective kind of use, right? You don't think about that as the reason why you would have yarn. Nonetheless, there's an opportunity there,
It
and
does last a while too, yeah.
it lasts quite a while, especially with the wax. So the reason we bring these kind of examples up is to reflect on how there is so many different. Sorry, my slides are a little bit slow getting up here, but yeah, Teresa kind of reflecting on how so many of the things of our problems, there's many different variations of problems we have, and some of our solutions, there's ways that things can be solutions that we don't even imagine. We don't imagine yarn would be a solution for kind of addressing kind of fire in a camp situation, but nonetheless it can be. And so the idea with human-centered design is in part, how do you design projects and solutions which are innovative and which are taking these things, but ultimately are solving real life problems. So with human-centered design, there's a couple kind of key principles we want to highlight. One is the fact that we want design projects that are designed with people at the center. We want projects that are designed kind of thinking about their needs and their inputs, as well as we kind of develop what ultimately addresses things for them. We want to solve the right problem. So this is an important kind of point, because oftentimes we don't address root problems, but we address symptoms of a problem. So for example, let's say in a if you're exploring something around mental health challenges, there might be someone who is outwardly showing a behavior you might consider negative, and so our initial impulse might be, let's just deal with the negative behavior, but we're not necessarily addressing then some of the underlying causes that may be contributing to them reacting in a certain way. And so the real problem might be to address things that are impacting them in terms of their mental health, that are deeper, although what we are seeing at a surface level is going to be that negative behavior. So I think here it's important to think about which problem we're addressing. It doesn't mean that addressing symptoms is a bad thing. In some situations, we absolutely do need to do that. So for example, in a situation around homelessness, there might be root problems which are leading to people being unhoused. However, there's an immediate symptom of that also needs to be addressed around the fact that they might not have a place to sleep. And so you may want to address that immediately, but at the same time, a full solution may also need to look at what are the root issues that are contributing to someone potentially being in this vulnerable situation. And this connects this idea that everything is a system. And the idea here is that there's oftentimes multiple things that are impacting any problem that we are seeing up front. Similarly, almost any solution we come up with may have unintended impacts that we also need to think about, especially when you look at things as kind of connected to each other in the in the systems way. And equally, thinking about small, simple interventions is also powerful. And sometimes, here we often get tempted where we want to address something like an issue of housing is a huge thing. And so sometimes even doing a small, simple intervention which addresses a particular aspect of that still has a ton of value. And part of the idea with human-centered design that we're going to go into is, how do we come up with realistic solutions that make sense for our capacities in terms of the immediate, and then and then we can potentially address other kind of bigger solutions in the future as well. Yeah, so let's kind of continue here and kind of dig into some of these things. So with design thinking, part of the idea is, especially in beginning stages, we want to both identify the problem and make sure it's a real problem that we're solving, and then also define the problem in a way that creates like kind of has a clear problem statement. And sometimes, it's again tempting to try and solve like a huge issue, but sometimes dealing with something that's localized, address a particular part of that problem can really make a big difference. So, for example, looking at the situation with housing, one of our teams last year, they didn't try to deal with all of the housing problems in their community. Rather, they said that for a very particular part of Vancouver, they're going to focus on how do we get people who are unhoused clothing, especially for the winter. So it's a very specific problem that they address, which is nonetheless a very real problem, and that became the basis of an initial entry point for a solution. But in their project, they also talked about future plans of how they might expand that to different kinds of basic needs, and how do you get other basic needs to individuals who are in a situation of being housed as well. Similar with solutions, you want to brainstorm different solutions and think about how you iterate different solutions as you go along. Here, sorry, so going backwards. So this is a diagram that we did share in the ideation workshop, and I won't go through it in too much depth here, but I'll just kind of reflect on this kind of general approach. So oftentimes when you have a problem, it's very relevant to think about all of these sub-problems that one might have underneath the major problem statement. So for example, again, with housing is a big problem. And underneath, there's many sub-problems. There's a sub-problem around the fact that housing is too expensive. There's a sub-problem around the fact that many people who are going through various challenges at home may get kicked out, and then they don't have a place to go. There might be a sub problem around the fact that there's beyond just housing, there's other essential needs that people need to address that aren't being met. I'm going to turn off my video because I'm seeing it's being a bit glitchy here. Okay. So you'll have lots of potential problems, and then part of your challenge is to investigate these problems, see which ones make sense for you to address and reflect real needs, and then from there you're going to then ideate on a whole bunch of potential solutions. In terms of how to narrow it down, I do encourage folks to check out the ideation workshop. We talk about a bunch. We talk about bringing in the concept of ikigai, which is a Japanese concept, which kind of challenges people to think about when you have so many problems, and how do you address something that's ultimately, yes, it's a real problem. It's also going to reflect on any solutions you come up with, reflects on things that you have control over in terms of your own skill sets, things that potentially there's other people willing to support, and again, and ultimately you want a problem that's also, you want a solution that's also dealing with things that you love to do and your own passions. So there's many potential ways to deal with problems, but then finding solutions which also ultimately address things that reflect these considerations. So you come up with a problem, you divide into all these potential sub-problems, you identify a sub-problem you want to address, you identify all these potential solutions, and then you come up with a specific solution that is worth addressing. So these are the kind of cycles we do talk about a bunch in the ideation workshop. So going now to the next slide here. You're going to see this kind of sweet spot that is kind of, actually, this, by the way, is coming from another staff of ours, Maggie, who developed another workshop where some of these concepts were introduced. And we talked already about the market research workshop from Amanda Tanner, who we really encourage folks to kind of check out a recording for. So as you come up with all these problems, you also want to think about what that sweet spot between what is a solution that is viable in terms of, for example, you have money, you have resources, you have human power to actually deal with it. What is a solution that is desirable in terms of whether it should actually be something that is really addressing these needs, and also something that's feasible. So you're trying to find a sweet sweet spot, this innovation sweet spot across all of these different kind of elements of the potential set of solutions to see which solution you may want to start with. And of course, when you start with this, you're always going to be iterating and developing. What do we mean by that? Here you're going to see that there's a little bit of a cycle where there's essentially three stages that we kind of identify in the design thinking process. The first stage is around understanding, and what that means is you want to empathize with the problem and define it as well. So this is where you're doing your research. You're doing your market research. You're really trying to understand what is the problem that participants or the community I'm wanting to serve are dealing with, and let's really kind of define a more specific problem statement. After that, you're going to ideate potential solutions, and you want to maybe prototype something. What you mean by prototype is you want to try a solution which isn't necessarily like the most comprehensive ever that's dealing with all of these potential elements of the problem, but rather just some kind of a starting point. So, for example, with that. With the example of giving people who are unhoused additional clothes, the prototype for the team which did that was essentially we're going to go and give them mittens in the beginning. We have a couple people we were connected with who either produce these mittens or have extras, and that's kind of going to be our starting point to kind of get. Sorry, I think I was unmuted there. Yeah, next you're gonna test those prototypes. You're gonna put it out there, try uh, try this kind of thing. Let's provide these mittens, and maybe as you test it, you realize that people say, actually, what we need really are scarves. We've got a whole rack of mittens already. We don't actually need that. We need scarves. We need blankets. We need something else, right? And so as you test it out, especially in the real world, you're going to see that there's going to be new things that are prototyped then, right? New kind of opportunities that are prototyped, and then you start implementing those things. So this is kind of what you mean by the design thinking process. So you're going to notice that there are arrows which at one level are moving forward, but your arrows are also constantly going back, because maybe there's things that you need to research. You implement something, but no, it turns out we need to like go back to our market research and our stakeholder research and really see if what we're doing is actually helping, or maybe we need to do something a little bit different. So there's a lot there. I'm going to go into these next slides, but before I do so, I just want to pause here. Jess or Kevin, any kind of questions that have that are kind of coming up as we move forward here?
No questions on my end so far.
Sounds good. In that case, we'll move forward. So the next kind of thing looks at this question of with problem statements. How do we identify, state, and define our problems? And so we've talked about this a little bit here, but you want to think about, what's something that's giving the itch. What I mean by the itch is like, what's the kind of problem that just makes you really want to do something about it. So I don't know, maybe Jess or Kevin, will either of you want to kind of share a problem that gives you the itch, that you're like, hey, this is a real thing, it's impacting so many people, I would love to do something about it.
I guess I'll go, and I'll leave space in case Kevin wants to go as well. I guess, and one I've kind of been working on a bit, but also one that's close to me is like the lack of awareness around the mental health resources that are out there, because there are like so many resources, but just not enough awareness or knowledge on how to access those resources.
Excellent. So there's a problem, right? So there are a decent set of mental health resources out there, maybe especially in this community of mine, but it's not well known. And so with that, we may want to be like, okay, well, who are the players who are providing these resources? What are they providing? When are these various workshops and things that they're doing happening? And why is there this gap, right? And is it the fact that there isn't like cross sharing? Are they working together to like also complement the resources, or is everyone kind of in their own silos? So all of these things kind of might contribute. So you want to kind of go into that who, what, when, why. You also want to do and again, you might want to do all of that research. Here, you'll have an opportunity to explore various solutions. So maybe, Jess, what are a couple of solutions to this problem that you think are worth exploring?
I think possibly building connections with other organizations in the space might be a solution. Possibly looking at a centralized platform um,
Hmm.
that combines them, but also possibly working with other organizations to break the problem down further into like a more manageable kind of field might be also an option.
Excellent. So all these potential solutions, and then here, I you might explore each of those. I know with, for example, creating a centralized platform, there's a project called Opportunities for Youth, which YC often partners with, and they try and provide a centralized platform for all of these youth opportunities. So similarly, could we do something similar for the mental health space? I think there's definitely an opportunity for that. Having those collaborations, and even if different partners came together and developed things. So maybe there's something to say about even just creating a network amongst people who are looking to provide resources. All these possibilities. And so part of this idea is, you're going to go into that ideation stage where now you're now exploring different ideas and trying to use human-centered design principles to narrow them down. This is something I'm not going to talk about too much here because we talk about it quite a bit in the ideation workshop. But there's a concept called Scamper, and Scamper, the idea is that with solutions you have, you may want to substitute some elements, combine other elements, adapt certain elements, modify, put into another use, eliminate, rearrange. And so essentially we do go into it a lot more in the first ideation workshop. I'm going to maybe recommend that people go back. But the thought here is that any solution you come up with, especially when you look at other solutions that are already out there, it might be relevant to think about, how do we kind of develop, adapt them to make sense for the particular context that we may be. Here as well, I want to bring in this concept of agile development. So this is one of my favorite pictures when it comes to this presentation. So the idea here is, there's a temptation sometimes that we want to build a car. What do I mean by that? So let's say, what is the problem? Okay, what is the problem that a car is solving?
Um, Potentially distance making it harder for people to access the supports and service they need.
No, let's simplify. Like at the end of the day, what is the problem a car is solving? What does it help you do?
It helps you get to where you need to go.
Yeah, it helps you get from point A to point B.
Mhm.
And there's a temptation that when we have the concept of a car, we see in our head that we want to build this elaborate solution, that we see the first step as being we're going to create a wheel, and you're going to create like this body, and then eventually you're going to create a car, right? Like there's this temptation to try and essentially make the car itself, but you're going to notice you can't really use the body by itself to transport a person. You can't use the wheel by itself to transport a person. And so this is an example of you can see the X's there. So if we have an approach around developing solutions where we just want to do the most optimistic, ambitious thing, and we put all our energy into doing that, what you can miss is the actual real opportunity to try and build a solution in more progressive steps, where in each step the problem is being solved, but to a lesser extent. So if you look at the right side of this diagram, you're going to see a skateboard. So with a skateboard, the idea is that I'm still able to get from A to B faster, but it's a very simple mechanism, right? It's a board with a couple wheels on it, but a person can still get on there and get from A to B faster. There's a next level. So now let's say we put it out to the world and we see that, oh, people are enjoying it, but some people are finding it's hard to kind of get the balance going. So you might have a next step, and you say, okay, now we're going to do a bicycle. It's a little bit more accessible. More people can bike, and this is another way that you can get to point A to B faster, but even faster than just a skateboard. and then you do some iteration and it turns out that, you know what, this is working really well, but some folks who are in areas with a lot of hills and mountains, they're not finding it as effective, and so you maybe need to put a motor on it. So your next step would be, you have motorcycle, which now puts a motor on it. You're able to get from A to B even faster, and you're able to deal with hills and all of these things, and you're able to carry more stuff, carry more weight, all of these things. So that's great. But then you have another problem where some people are like, hey, what if I have 3 passengers on board and I want to get a larger number of people and things? And that's where you might develop a car. So you're going to notice at each step, do you notice how the problem is being solved? A to B is, you are able to move from A to B faster, but each step, there's kind of another level of the innovation that's being added, but each step itself is still kind of able to address the initial problem. Unlike the approach that many people do, where they want to build a fancy app right from the beginning versus doing the initial kind of smaller things to get to that bigger point. Is this clear what I'm trying to get across? So essentially, start with those small steps before you kind of develop your big fancy solution.
I think that makes sense to me.
Cool. All right. And this is what I'm going to really emphasize this, especially as it relates to folks at YC. I do see a lot of proposals which are just like so complex and ambitious, and it's great, but at the same time, just having something that's simple, that's addressing something more tangible, like, and realistic, can go such a long way, especially to say this is our first step, and you know what, in our proposal we're going to share what we see our next steps going beyond, but at least this is our first step. It's an initial entry point, and it's still very, very powerful and effective in addressing the problem to at least some extent. So moving forward, I'm going to really encourage you folks to think about the research you folks need to do, the various lens you may want to bring into play. So like with research, like I especially go back, we referring a lot to Amanda's workshop there on market research. Think about market research possibilities. Think about different perspectives, ideas, lenses that you may want to bring to ensure that you have a complete understanding, or not a complete understanding, at least a very thorough understanding of the problem you're dealing. Think about various systems and how things are interconnected and in complex in different ways, but also ultimately what's kind of tangible for you to do. So this is kind of some core basic elements of our kind of the human-centered design process. I recognize here that there's quite a lot there. I should say YC Summer 25, all good. But yeah, there's quite a lot there. But really at the core, what we want to like really highlight is, do your market research, start start small. You don't have to like solve the problem like in a very fancy, huge way. You can start with a smaller, more tangible solution. Continually iterate, and as you iterate, you're going to notice that you're going to always be coming back to the initial solution and developing it further. To that end as well, whenever you put a solution out there to the world, it should be changing. It should be changing, and you will have stakeholders and folks, clients and others who are saying it. You know what? Let's do this a little bit differently. And I think those are all positive and great things. And I do kind of encourage folks to just kind of embrace that design thinking process as you kind of go back. But alrighty, I think that's all from me. Jess, do you have any initial questions? Or are you good there?
I think no questions on my end, but thank you I honestly, Shang-Chi, going into this, did not know as much about human-centered design, so I'm glad I got the opportunity to attend, and I encourage anyone to take a look at the recording if they're interested. I realize they're probably already taking a look if they're watching this, but I guess I mean to take a look at some of our other workshops as well.
Absolutely. And you know what? I just want to give a plug in just to all these other good workshops, like you said there, Jess. There's a few that we've already historically done that they record their recordings for. There's a few that are on the agenda that we're going to be sharing, and all of them connect with this kind of concept of human-centered design. Although this kind of designed to help people write and develop their proposals, it's going to be very, very relevant at literally any step of their innovation journey. So we do hope it also makes a difference. So let me get my camera back on since I had some troubles there, and just say to everyone, if you can see me, thank you so much. We really appreciate all your energy in terms of bringing forth some really incredible ideas to the world. And we are excited to review your proposals. Thank you, everyone. And I hope you've learned something and enjoyed our presentation today. Thank you.